This podcast contains content generated or significantly edited using artificial intelligence tools. All information is provided for general informational purposes only and reflects knowledge available at the time of publication. It does not constitute financial, investment, or legal advice. We recommend that listeners verify the information independently and consult with qualified professionals for personalized advice.
Welcome to the Luxembourg Fundcast. Today, we're diving deep into the Luxembourg Fund Service ecosystem. It's a pretty complex world, lots of moving parts, lots of rules.
That's right. And our mission today is really to help you cut through some of that complexity. We want you to get a quick, solid handle on the really crucial role of the investment fund manager, the IFM.
Think of the IFM as the central conductor here. So this deep dive should give you, the key takeaways, the things that really matter for understanding how it all works.
Exactly. And whether you're coming at this from a legal perspective, financial services, or maybe corporate governance, we're going to try and unpack that multi-layered regulatory landscape. And the practical challenges too, right? Because it's not just theory.
Definitely not.
Oh.
We want to give you real insights into building, robust operational and compliance models. We'll stick to the classic 5 W's and H: who, what, when, where, why, and how, just to keep things clear and easy to follow.
Okay, great. Let's start with that foundational idea then. Central responsibility. It all seems to come back to the IFM.
It really does.
Right.
The core principle here is that the IFM holds ultimate and, importantly, non-delegable responsibility.
So non-delegable means they can outsource tasks, but not the actual responsibility.
Precisely. Think of the IFM, whether it's a UCIX management company, a ManCo, or an alternative investment fund manager, an AIFM, as that orchestra conductor. They might have delegate players, expert soloists, but they are 100% accountable for the entire performance.
Meaning the fund's whole operational setup, compliance, everything.
Everything. And increasingly, this now explicitly includes information and communication technology risk, ICT risk. That's a big one.
Okay, so why? Why concentrate all that responsibility in one place? What was the goal?
Well, it's a very deliberate regulatory move. It's designed to prevent these letterbox entities.
The shell companies.
Exactly.
Yep.
Firms that just exist on paper, maybe outsourcing everything important without keeping proper control. This framework forces a coherent governance structure. It protects investors and, crucially, it gives regulators one clear entity to hold accountable if things go wrong. It ensures there's real substance here in Luxembourg.
Makes sense. So how does an IFM actually do that? How do they exercise this central control in practice?
It boils down to having a really robust, well-documented internal governance framework. The key piece is a comprehensive outsourcing and delegation policy.
And that needs board approval.
Absolutely. Formally approved by the board of directors. Plus, you need enough people and the right tech resources dedicated just to overseeing delegates.
Oversight isn't cheap.
No, it isn't. And you also need a specific officer, someone whose job it is to manage these outsourcing arrangements, reporting directly up to the management body.
Mm-hmm.
It's about active, hands-on management, definitely not just passive reliance.
That sounds like a major shift from how things might have been done before. How has the regulator, the CSSF, the Commission de Surveillance du Secteur Financier, really pushed this?
Well, it's fascinating, actually. The whole regulatory environment, especially since the AIFM directive, the AIFMG came in, has just fundamentally reshaped the IFM business model.
How so?
Historically, delegation might have been, a straightforward commercial decision. Maybe you needed specific expertise or you thought you could save costs.
But
now the IFM keeps full, undiluted liability for absolutely everything delegated, no matter who's doing the work.
I remember that CSSF thematic review in October 2024, the one on portfolio management delegation. That felt like a bit of a wake-up call.
It really was. A proper reality check, as you say. It specifically criticized IFMs for just passively relying on their delegates' self-assessments.
They wanted more proactive oversight.
Exactly. Proactive, evidence-based, documented oversight by the IFM itself. They basically said, you need to challenge your delegates, verify their work internally. Don't just take their word for it.
And now DORA adds another layer.
Right. The Digital Operational Resilience Act, DORA. It pulls this ultimate responsibility firmly into the tech domain. ICT third-party risk is now a primary board-level governance issue. No escaping it.
So, okay, wrapping this part up, what does this all mean for you, the professional working in this area?
Here's the crux of it. You're not just looking at the fund's assets anymore. You're really assessing the governance of its entire operational ecosystem. This whole mix of pressures forces IFMs to evolve.
From just managing assets
to basically managing the managers of assets And managing their tech and admin support, too. It means different staffing models.
Yeah.
You need people who understand vendor management, contract law, cybersecurity, maybe things you didn't focus on before.
And board expertise needs to change, too.
Definitely. Boards need members who genuinely understand operational risk and technology. And your budgets, your resource allocation they have to reflect this new reality. It's a strategic shift.
That's a really clear picture of the responsibility. So given all that, how do IFMs navigate the rules? Let's talk about the modern delegation framework itself. You mentioned layers.
Yeah, think of it like a rule book with multiple layers. Layer 1 is the foundation. CSSF, Circular 18698, came out in August 2018.
The cornerstone, you called it.
It really is. It pulls together the conditions for authorization and the ongoing organization for all Luxembourg IFMs, UCITES, ManCos, AIFMs, even self-managed investment companies, the SIGs. It covers governance, central admin, the delegation rules themselves, and even things like AML-CFT, anti-money laundering, and combating the financing of terrorism. It's the baseline.
Okay, Layer 1, 18698. Then Layer 2 was that reality check review from October 2024.
Right. That review gave critical feedback on how 18698 was actually being applied or not applied in practice. It was based on CSSF reviews between 2021 and 2024.
And what were the main takeaways? Where were firms falling short?
The big things were needing much more granular procedures, much more robust due diligence, not just relying on delegate questionnaires, having mandatory contingency plans and credible exit strategies before things go wrong.
And justifying the delegation itself.
Yes, having documented objective reasons for why you're delegating in the first place. And interestingly, they recommended that UCITES and COWs should basically follow the same documentation standards as AIFMs. Kind of a convergence there. The message was clear. Show your work.
Got it. And Layer 3, the European piece.
That's AIFMD2, Directive EU 224927, published in the official journal back in March 2024. This amends both the original AIFM directive and the UCI's directive.
When does that kick in?
Member states have until April 2026 to transpose it into national law. So it's coming. Key changes include stricter substance requirements like needing at least 2 full-time people based in the union for an AIFM.
More boots on the ground.
Essentially, yes. And also systematic reporting on delegation, who the delegate is, what they're doing, how much assets are under delegation. More transparency. It also clarifies the definition of marketing, whether a distributor is acting for the AIFM, which counts as delegation, or just on their own behalf.
Okay, so these layers, 18698, the CSSF review, AIFMD2. It feels like there's a real tension building. You've got the business reasons to delegate expertise, maybe cost.
Maybe cost, yeah.
And then this pile of regulatory oversight burden. The cost of managing the delegation must be shooting up.
You've absolutely nailed it. And this is where it gets, well, really interesting for IFM strategically. That traditional cost savings argument, it's looking pretty shaky now.
How so?
Many IFMs are realizing they didn't eliminate costs, they just shifted them. Now they have to do much more complex cost-benefit sums. They have to factor in the cost of compliance.
Meaning internal staff time, lawyers, consultants.
All of that. Plus technology investment for oversight. This total cost of ownership calculation might actually make some IFMs think twice about how much they delegate, maybe bring functions back in-house, or at least invest way more in their internal oversight teams to manage what's left. It's forcing a serious rethink of the whole operating model.
Fascinating. Okay, so let's get practical. With all these rules, what does the delegation life cycle actually look like day to day? From picking someone to saying goodbye, there has to be a process, right?
Oh, definitely. A formal internal procedure is key. It needs to answer the who, why, how, and when.
Let's start with who. Who can you delegate to?
Well, you need to identify and select a suitable delegate. This could be someone in your own corporate group or a completely separate third party.
Any preference?
The CSSF actually cautions against relying too heavily on intra-group delegates. There are potential concentration risks, conflicts of interest. You need to be careful. The choice has to be objective and always in the best interests of the fund and its investors.
Okay, so that's the who. What about the why? Why are you delegating this function?
You need clear, documented, objective reasons before you delegate anything. Maybe it's accessing specialized expertise you just don't have, or maybe genuine operational efficiencies, or perhaps demonstrable cost savings, if that analysis still holds up after factoring in the compliance costs we just talked about.
And that justification needs to be on file.
Absolutely. The CSSF can ask for it. It's a critical piece of the puzzle.
Right. Then the how. Starting with initial due diligence, IDD. This isn't just a formality.
No way. IDD needs to be treated like a forensic investigation, not a tick box exercise. It has to be deep, evidence-based, and result in a formal written report.
What kind of things are you looking at?
It's pretty extensive. Their regulatory status, obviously, their reputation, governance structures, especially how they handle conflicts of interest, financial health, looking at audited accounts, their operational and technical muscle staff, IT systems, their AML-CFT framework, even their own policies on subdelegating further down the chain. You need the full picture.
Okay, deep dive IDD done. But the how doesn't stop there, right? It's ongoing.
Exactly. Delegation is absolutely not fire and forget. The IFM has a continuous duty to monitor.
How does that work?
Well, there's ongoing performance monitoring. You set up key performance indicators, KPIs, within your service level agreements, your SLAs, and you track them. Things like NEV calculation deadlines, accuracy rates, whatever is relevant.
And periodic check-ins?
Yes, periodic due diligence. You refresh your assessment on a risk-based schedule, check they're still suitable, review any action plans, again, all documented in written reports. And very importantly, the IFM's own internal audit team has to include delegated activities within its audit scope.
Okay, makes sense. Finally, the when, termination, and exit, planning for the end.
You have to plan for the end right from the start, especially for critical or important functions. IFMs need documented contingency plans and clear exit strategies.
What does that involve?
Thinking through the impacts. What are the costs, the resources needed? How much time will it take if this relationship ends? What are the options? Transfer to someone else. Bring it back in-house. The delegation agreement itself must allow for immediate termination if it's necessary to protect investors. That was a big point in that CSSF feedback.
So the agreement is key. If the life cycle is the journey, the delegation agreement is the map and the rule book combined.
That's a great way to put it. It's more than just a commercial contract. It's really a primary regulatory tool. It's the proof that the IFM is maintaining control. Your legal and compliance teams are essentially building regulatory architecture through these clauses.
What are the must-have clauses then?
Okay, essentials include clear parties, term, and a really granular scope of services. No ambiguity about what's delegated. The SLA with specific measurable KPIs.
Access rights.
Absolutely non-negotiable. Information, inspection, and access rights for the IFM, their auditors, and the CSSF. Unrestricted access to info, data, premises for on-site checks.
What about subdelegation if your delegate wants to outsource?
That needs the IFM's prior written consent for anything critical or important.
Yep.
And you have to ensure all the duties, access, confidentiality, business continuity flow down to the subdelegate.
And data protection, confidentiality.
Crucial. Compliance with Article 41 of the Luxembourg banking law, that's professional secrecy, and Article 28 of GDPR for data processing. Business continuity and disaster recovery plans are also mandatory for the delegate, including regular testing and cooperation.
Liability, termination.
Yep. Clear liability and indemnification clauses. Delegate is liable for fraud, negligence, etc. Termination clauses covering various scenarios, breach, insolvency, loss of license, but critically, that immediate termination right to protect investors. And finally, exit assistance. The delegate has to cooperate for an orderly transition. DORA actually mandates this for IAT services now.
So for you listening, these clauses aren't just boilerplate. They turn policy into enforceable rights.
Exactly. They are the mechanisms for control and oversight.
Okay, let's pivot slightly. We've touched on tech with DORA, but let's focus on that intersection. Operations, regulation, technology, it feels like a really critical nexus now.
It absolutely is. And DORA, the Digital Operational Resilience Act, is right at the heart of it. It's a fundamental shift.
How so? It's an EU regulation, right?
Yeah.
Applies directly.
Yes, directly applicable. And the shift is from thinking just about ICT outsourcing to a much broader holistic concept of ICT third-party risk management. And it applies to all ICT service providers, not just traditional outsourcers.
And the CSSF has updated its own rules to match.
They did. In April 2025, they published new and amended circulars to align Luxembourg's framework with DORA. It creates quite a new landscape.
What are the key changes for IFMs to be aware of?
Well, first, the scope has expanded massively. CSSF Circular 25882 applies to all ICT third-party arrangements. Think software as a service, SaaS providers, data vendors. They all now fall under formal risk management.
What about the old outsourcing circular, 22806?
For entities in scope of DORA, which is most IFMs, Circular 22806 now only covers non-ICT business process outsourcing. Everything ICT related is now under DORA and the new Circular 25882.
Any notification requirements?
Yes, mandatory notification. You have to tell the CSSF in advance, usually 3 months or 1 month if you're a Luxembourg professional of the financial sector, a PFS, before outsourcing critical or important ICT functions.
And a register.
A big one. A comprehensive register of information for all ICT third-party deals, submitted annually. It needs provider details, service descriptions, your criticality assessment, where data is processed, contract dates, a huge amount of detail. It's about deep transparency.
Wow. Okay, so managing data across different firms, maybe different countries.
Yeah.
You mentioned a triple constraint: Luxembourg professional secrecy, GDPR, and DORA.
Exactly. It's like navigating a three-way intersection. Constraint 1, Luxembourg professional secrecy, LPS Article 41 of the banking law. Its strict breach is criminal.
How do you get around that for outsourcing?
The main way is if your provider is a Luxembourg-based support PFS, an authorized support entity here.
Yeah.
If they're not, you generally need explicit, detailed client consent covering the specific data and where it's going.
Okay, so LPS is the first hurdle, then GDPR.
Constraint 2, the General Data Protection Regulation. GDPR protects personal data EU-wide.
Key things are having a lawful basis for processing, doing data protection by design like data protection impact assessments, DPIAs respecting data subject rights, ensuring security, and being very careful with international transfers outside the European Economic Area, the EEA. You need things like adequacy decisions or appropriate safeguards, like the EU standard contractual clauses, the SECs.
And the third constraint, DORA itself.
Right. DORA adds specific requirements for the operational resilience and security of the ICT systems and the data they handle. One specific point from the CSSF Circular 25882 is the requirement for a designated cloud officer if you use cloud services.
A cloud officer, what do they do?
They oversee cloud use, ensure staff are competent, act as a contact point, and need the right expertise for managing and securing whatever cloud platform you're using.
So these three, LPS, GDPR, DORA, how do they interact in practice? What's the sequence? This is really critical to understand. For a Luxembourg IFM, professional secrecy often acts as the gateway. You have to legally satisfy LPS requirements first.
Before you even worry about GDPR.
Essentially, yes. You could have an arrangement that looks perfectly fine under GDPR, but if you haven't properly addressed LPS, maybe got the right consents for a non-support PFS provider, it could still be illegal under Luxembourg law.
So legal, compliance, IT, they need to be perfectly aligned.
Absolutely. Joined-up thinking is required. It's a very precise sequence you need to follow. A complex dance, as you said earlier.
Okay, that leads nicely into how you enforce this governance technically. Secure platforms, access control, identity and access management, IAM.
Exactly. IAM is where the rubber meets the road for regulatory compliance in this area. Managing who gets access to what data, when, how. That's a core part of the IFM's oversight duty.
So bad tech implementation equals a compliance failure.
Directly. A failure in technical controls is a failure in regulatory compliance. Full stop. Best practices include things like centralized IAM systems, role-based access control, RBAC, so access is tied to roles, not people.
What about sensitive accounts? Admin access.
That needs privileged access management, PM. Things like just-in-time access, recording sessions, and multi-factor authentication, MFA, should be the absolute baseline for everyone now.
And when you're choosing platforms or providers, what security features are crucial?
Your due diligence has to really kick the tires on security. Look for end-to-end encryption, E2EE, granular access controls, comprehensive audit trails, who did what, when, data loss prevention, DLP tools, and look for relevant compliance certifications like ISO 27001 or SOC2 reports. Trust, but verify with technology.
Right, we've covered a lot on regulation and tech. Let's switch gears a bit to the commercials, the timelines, the practical coordination stuff. How does pricing usually work here, say, for legal help?
Well, legal fees in Luxembourg aren't usually fixed tariffs. They depend on things like how complex the work is, the level of responsibility involved, the client's financial situation, the lawyer's reputation, how much time they put in.
So negotiation is key.
Yes, and getting a formal fee agreement, a convention d'honoraire, is really advisable. Pure success fees, where the lawyer only gets paid if they win, aren't allowed. But you can have a success component on top of a base fee.
And VAT.
All legal fees have 17% value-added tax, VAT, on top. And expect to pay a retainer up front. That's pretty standard.
Okay. What about the fund administrators, the managers themselves? How do they typically charge?
For fund management, you often see fees as a percentage of assets under management, AUM, maybe 1% to 2%, or sometimes based on total investor commitments. For admin services, it varies. Could be flat fees per sub-fund, tiered fees based on net asset value, NAV basis points, maybe per transaction charges, or sometimes cost-plus models where they charge you their actual costs plus an agreed markup.
That brings up intergroup delegation again. If an IFM delegates to its parent company, for example, transfer pricing must be a headache.
Oh, it's critically important. Transfer pricing, or TP. Tax authorities look very closely at these controlled transactions between related companies.
To make sure it's fair market value.
Exactly. They check it adheres to the arm's length principle, meaning the price charged should be what independent parties would agree on.
How do you prove that? Does Luxembourg require specific documentation?
There isn't a formal mandatory TP documentation filed by law, but you do have to cooperate fully with the tax authorities if they ask. So in practice, you need robust TP analysis. Usually this means using OECD-approved methods.
Like
the comparable uncontrolled price, or CUP method, or the cost-plus method, often used for more routine admin stuff, or maybe the profit split method if it's a very integrated function.
So for you listening, if you're doing intragroup delegation,
it adds significant tax and financial complexity. You need a proper functional analysis, probably a benchmark study, pick the right TP method. And remember the cost of getting TP advice and doing the ongoing internal work. That's another hidden cost to factor into your decision.
Good point. Okay, timelines. Setting up a fund here, how long does it realistically take?
It really depends on whether it's regulated or unregulated. Regulated funds like UCITS, SIFs, SICARs need direct CSSF authorization. You're probably looking at 3 to 6 months from the decision to launch.
And the CSSF review part of that?
That's typically 2 to 4 months within that total time frame. Unregulated funds, though, like the RAIF, the Reserved Alternative Investment Fund, or an SCSP, a Société en Commandite Spéciale, are much quicker.
Why is that?
Because they aren't directly supervised by the CSSF at the fund level. They get their regulatory status via their mandatory AIFM. So for them, you're looking at maybe 2 to 3 months total. Much faster.
And the key steps along the way?
Well, structuring the fund, drafting all the legal docs, getting CSSF authorization if needed, incorporating the fund entity, setting up bank accounts, and then the operational launch.
What are the biggest hurdles in coordinating all these different service providers, especially now with markets being volatile, regulations changing?
Yeah, the challenges are definitely real. Making sure everyone's ready for new regulations like DORA and the boards have the right expertise, managing potential conflicts of interest between providers, the fact that there's usually no single one-stop shop provider who does absolutely everything.
So you're juggling multiple relationships.
Exactly. And just the general increase in supervisory complexity and, frankly, cost as the CSSF itself grows and becomes more demanding. It's a juggling act.
So how do IFMs successfully manage that coordination challenge? What are the best practices?
It demands really proactive, structured effort from the IFM, acting as that central hub. A clear communication protocol is vital, regular, structured meetings with all the key players.
And clarity on roles.
Absolute precision in defining roles and responsibilities. Use those delegation agreements and SLAs not just as legal docs, but as operational blueprints. Spell out exactly who does what.
What about reporting upwards?
Integrated reporting and governance is key. Design a reporting framework for the IFM's management and board that pulls together information from all providers into one coherent picture. You need that holistic overview for effective oversight. It's about building that strong operational backbone we talked about.
Okay, let's try and wrap this up. We've really covered a lot of ground on the Luxembourg fund service ecosystem. The central, non-delegable role of the investment fund manager is clearly paramount.
Absolutely. And we've seen how different pieces fit together, the foundational rules like CSSF Circular 18698, the CSSF's push for real evidence in that 2024 review, the European harmonization through AIFMD2, and now this huge technological shift with DORA.
It all comes back to the IFM's responsibility.
It does. The IFM that thrives in the future will be the one that masters active, evidence-based oversight, rigorous due diligence, really tight contracts, and continuous monitoring.
And that triple constraint, professional secrecy, GDPR, DORA, demands incredible coordination.
Unprecedented coordination, really, between legal, compliance, IT, data management, access control.
Yeah.
These are now frontline regulatory functions, not just back-office tech issues.
Looking ahead, then, what are the big themes? DORA implementation, obviously.
Yes, the full impact of DORA will continue to unfold, testing digital resilience, and the ongoing push for more transparency, plus ESG, environmental, social, and governance integration will just keep adding layers of complexity.
Any new opportunities on the horizon?
Well, things like tokenization are certainly generating buzz. Could it reshape liquidity distribution? Possibly. but it also brings a whole new set of operational and regulatory questions that need answers.
So ultimately, it comes down to investment.
Investment in expertise, yes. Building that robust governance framework we discussed, and really fostering proactive, seamless coordination across the entire service provider network. That's the path to success.
This podcast contains content generated or significantly edited using artificial intelligence tools. All information is provided for general informational purposes only and reflects knowledge available at the time of publication. It does not constitute financial, investment, or legal advice. We recommend that listeners verify the information independently and consult with qualified professionals for personalized advice. Hit that like and subscribe button. It was the Luxembourg Fundcast for you today.